Hey everyone, welcome again. Um, this is the third time I'm doing a little Q&A, um, and I thought I'd pick one of the questions that often comes up. It's come up in comments as well as often uh, often in person. And the question is this: I get tired in the evenings, um, and it's really hard to practice. So what should I do? And I'll answer this in a couple of different ways. The practical, the slightly theoretical, and then hopefully bringing that back to practical. Um, so first off, I'd say just find a time that works for you. Um, Especially if you've gone to a Goenka retreat and you come off the retreat, you have this sense of like, oh, I should meditate twice a day and 1 hour in the morning and 1 hour in the evening. And if I can't do that, I'm not doing it right. And I used to have these really strange, especially after my first sit coming off, I would have these strange notions, because the timetable is so strict at a Vipassana retreat, that if it was like 10:02, I was like, oh, I missed the hour. I should have started at the hour. Okay, I'll start at 11, which is so strange. But our mind often finds ways to put off the meditation. Um, and then the other thing is this feeling that if I'm not doing a full hour, then I'm getting no benefit because Goenka says I have to sit for an hour. And I would say uh, to have a little self-compassion, and and just know that however much you do is actually going to have benefit. It's going to have this incremental benefit, and that the more you sit, um, as you turn it from something you do into something you can't do without, that you'll naturally develop a cadence that starts to look more like the 2 hours a day. Um, so the practical suggestion is find a time that works for you, find a time when you can sit and sit then, and don't get too caught up in the what you should or shouldn't do. Um, Specifically, if you're too tired to sit, if you're just feeling too tired that you're not able to concentrate, there's actually not, in my opinion, there's not going to be much benefit from you just struggling through that, if you're not even able to bring your attention into the present moment. So find a time, maybe the mornings work better for your schedule, sit then. Um, in my own personal experience, there have been times, I have two little kids, as I mentioned before, there have been times when I was meditating that second hour in the evenings, and I found that after I put the kids to bed, that sacred few hours after their sleep was the only time I got to spend time with my wife. And if I was instead uh, spending that hour meditating, that actually it was hurting my relationship because I wasn't having that communication time with my wife. And so I stopped doing it. And more recently, I found a different time in the day when I can do the second hour. And so I end up my morning sit is the one that's most consistent, and I do it early in the morning before the family wakes up, and that way I can feel like I get that solid practice. The slightly theoretical, and then I'll bring it back to practical. I wanted to use the analogy of golf um, in the following way: is that when you learn to play golf, typically you don't just go out on the golf course right away. Most people learn at a driving range, and one of the benefits of the driving range is that you've controlled for all these other factors. You've taken away, uh, you know, any obstacles like the water, the sand. You've taken away the variation in the kind of surface that you're hitting off, and you're just hitting off of a tee. So you're removing all these variables, and you can just focus on your stroke. Um, and in a way, when you learn to meditate, if you can find a quiet place, a consistent place, place where you're not going to be disturbed by people, a time when you're not going to be disturbed by people, a time when it doesn't, which is consistent enough that you don't have to keep asking yourself, is this the right time? And a place that is consistent so that you just kind of get into this habit. But no one turns into a pro golfer just by driving in the driving range. To play golf well, you have to learn to hit the ball as it lies, whether it's in the rough or in the sand or wherever it is. And similarly, we don't meditate so that we can become better meditators. We meditate so that we can become more skillful in how we deal with life's situations, right? And so, in that sense, over time, you may find that actually your relationship to am I too tired to sit changes into one of like, oh, I'm really tired right now. Let me observe what that tiredness is like and not get so caught up in um, being upset that my mind feels like it's wandering a lot. My attention is not able to be still, but rather noticing what the quality of my attention is. Um, and then just to take that analogy a little further, uh, even after you've quote unquote learned how to play golf, every pro golfer still spends time on the driving range. And so, similarly, even as you um, become more skillful in applying these practices, these learnings, your increased awareness in your daily life, there's still definitely a benefit to removing all of those variables and just sitting. And when I say variables, I this often also comes up in the context of like, do I have to find a quiet place? Do I have to find a place with a particular ambiance? And if you start going down that line of reasoning, you start to get into a very I need to buy more stuff. Maybe I need to buy the perfect cushion and the perfect um, sound machine so I can kind of block out external sounds, etc. And so, kind of rephrasing that or reframing that for yourself as I'm learning to first practice my swing in a very controlled way, and in that mindset, I might try to reduce the distractions or reduce the things that make it more difficult, like practicing at a time of the day when it's really tiring or practicing in a place that's really loud. But then can I reframe it of to like I'm learning to play the ball as it lies? And in that case, it's more like whether it's a sound or a difficulty like tiredness or something else, that's part of playing golf or that's part of life. And can I learn to be with that? Um, so I try to keep these things short, and I see that I've already gone to 7 minutes, so I will stop talking there. I see that there's a question while doing meditation: is fan on or off? Is the fan on or off? And I assume you're talking about maybe just having like if it's hot outside and you have the fan on. Um, Again, yeah, this is a really good question because you can think of it of like you start one can start to go down this route of, oh, should I be trying to be so stoic or so minimal, almost to the point of being a masochist, of inducing pain on myself and suffering through that pain like the great sages of many millennia ago. And one way to think about it is that there's enough difficulty to observe within ourselves that we don't need to add difficulty from the outside. So, practically speaking, if it's hot outside and you need to turn the fan on, or you have an air conditioner and you want to turn the air conditioner on, that's perfectly fine. I don't think you should in any way feel as if by doing so you're somehow losing out on the benefit of equanimity or anything like that. That said, once you decide to sit, see if you can observe. If you start to then observe, oh, it's really hot, and you have this sense, you have this temptation to suddenly get up and turn on the fan, or get up and close the door because someone's being loud. At that point, you can notice what is the impulse that's asking me to do that. And usually that impulse might be, in these examples, it might be an aversion to that heat or an aversion to that sound or a feeling of being annoyed or disturbed by that. Um, and so notice that, and then sit with that for a while. And you can, of course, again, I feel like there's a practical limit there. If your house is burning down, you're not going to sit there and be with it while the house burns down. Um, at the same time, uh, just notice what is the impulse that's driving that. And so you can use a heuristic like, I'm going to, I don't know, take 20 breaths uh, before I decide to respond to this thing. or decide if I want to respond to this thing, or I'm going to wait 5 minutes before I decide if I want to respond to this thing. So see if you can start by just having this idea of not responding or reacting right away to any impulse, whether it's to get up, whether it's to shift positions, whether it's to turn on the fan or whatever else. But just be with it for a little while and observe what's underlying that, and then use that uh, to then respond if needed. Or maybe sometimes you might decide, actually, I am able to deal with this heat for the next 20 minutes. It's not going to kill me. I'll just deal with it. And then next time I'll turn on the fan before I sit. And so that might be a way to start using your practice as a practice in equanimity. Um, I see another question. My Vipassana retreat has been canceled. Could you recommend a similar routine I could do at home, please? Um, what I would recommend is that there are many meditation or mindfulness apps out there, and there's nothing really that can replace a 10-day silent retreat. So I definitely want to say that I feel like the experience you have on retreat um, is something that I don't want to pretend that you can replace either through an app or through hearing instructions from someone over the internet or something like that. Um, but that said, I think there are, if you look in the mindfulness space, I don't know what your experience level is. If you look in the space, you'll see lots of apps, lots of online guidance. And if you just start doing that, I think that might create the beginnings of a practice. And even if that practice starts at 5 minutes a day or 2 minutes a day, where you're just starting to become aware of your breath and notice your ability to notice your distractions and come back to the breath, and then over time expand your awareness to the body. I think that'll be a great foundation and will have benefit of itself, its own benefit, as well as laying a foundation for if and when hopefully you do get to go on retreat sometime. So thank you guys for the questions. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I hope this is helpful to people. And I'll try to do more of these. So thank you again.